When you think of the Middle Ages, your mind probably jumps to valiant knights in shining armor, majestic stone castles, grand banquets, or powerful kings waging war. If women are mentioned at all, they are usually painted as helpless princesses waiting in high towers or noble ladies wearing velvet gowns. But if we peel back the romanticized layers of medieval history, we discover a vast, forgotten army of human beings who kept the entire world from starving to death: the medieval peasant women. Making up over 80% of the population, these female farmers led lives that were brutal, relentless, and extraordinarily complex. From the moment the sun rose until long after dark, a medieval farm woman's existence was a desperate race against starvation, plague, childbirth, and crushing social laws. Today, we are stepping into the mud, sweat, and firelight of the Middle Ages to reveal the shocking, unvarnished reality of what life was truly like for a medieval farm woman. To understand the sheer magnitude of a peasant woman's burden, we must first shatter the myth that medieval housewives simply stayed indoors while their husbands worked the fields. In the feudal system, survival required every single pair of hands. From early childhood until the day they died, peasant women engaged in grueling physical labor alongside men, while simultaneously bearing the full weight of domestic duties. A typical day began long before dawn, around 4 in the morning. Inside a cold, dark, one-room timber and mud hut with a dirt floor, the farm woman was responsible for lighting the central fire, which filled the chimneyless home with thick, choking smoke. She had to haul gallons of heavy water from local streams or communal wells, cook the morning meal of rough oats or grain porridge, and tend to the household livestock before her family went out to labor. Once the morning household tasks were finished, the farm woman headed out into the fields. During planting and harvest seasons, female labor was absolute necessity. Women performed backbreaking fieldwork, including weeding crops, scattering seeds, reaping wheat and barley with sharp sickles, tying heavy sheaves of grain, and loading carts. During sheep shearing season, women handled the physical washing, shearing, and sorting of raw wool. Yet, despite performing the exact same dangerous, exhausting work in the open sun alongside male laborers, medieval records reveal that female agricultural workers were paid only half to two-thirds of the wages given to men for the exact same labor. If field labor was not enough, a farm woman's work at home was a secondary full-time job that never ended. Every peasant household relied on a small piece of land called a croft or cottage garden. The woman was entirely responsible for cultivating this plot, growing vegetables like leeks, onions, cabbages, peas, and beans, which provided the vital nutrients keeping her family alive through harsh winters. She also tended to the poultry, collected eggs, milked cows or goats, and processed raw milk into butter and cheese, a critical medieval protein known as white meat. Furthermore, making clothing was an agonizingly slow process entirely resting on her shoulders. Medieval peasant women did not buy clothes from markets. They made every single thread by hand. Every spare second of a farm woman's day, whether walking to the fields, watching the children, or sitting by the fire at night, was spent holding a spindle and distaff, spinning raw wool or flax into yarn. This yarn then had to be woven, cut, and hand-sewn into rough, itchy garments for the entire family. A woman could never sit with idle hands. If she was not spinning, her family went naked and cold. Yet, despite her endless economic contributions, a medieval farm woman lived under an unforgiving legal and religious hierarchy. Under feudal law, a peasant woman was legally classified as the property of her father, and upon marriage, she became the legal property of her husband. Under the legal doctrine of coverture, a married woman had no independent legal identity. She could not own property in her own name, sign contracts, or keep her own wages without her husband's consent. The Christian Church of the Middle Ages reinforced this absolute submission, preaching that women were the daughters of Eve, inherently weak, sinful, and naturally subject to male authority. Domestic abuse was not merely tolerated, it was legally sanctioned. A husband had the legal right to beat his wife for disobedience, provided he did not kill her or cause permanent bodily disfigurement. For a peasant woman, marriage was rarely a matter of romance. It was a survival pact arranged around economic stability and labor needs. Girls were often betrothed in their mid to late teens, though among the poorest serfs, marriage occurred slightly later when the couple could afford a small cottage and land holding. Once married, the farm woman entered the most dangerous phase of her life, her reproductive years. In an era before sanitation, germ theory, or basic medical care, Pregnancy was a terrifying gamble. A medieval farm woman was expected to produce as many children as possible to provide labor for the farm and secure inheritance for the land holding. However, giving birth was one of the leading causes of death for women. Labor took place in filthy, dark cottages on straw beds, assisted only by local village midwives whose knowledge was passed down through folk tradition and superstitions. Infections like puerperal fever, uncontrollable hemorrhaging, and obstructed labors were routine death sentences. Approximately 1 in every 5 mothers died in childbirth. If the mother survived, the tragedy often turned to her children. Severe malnutrition, seasonal food shortages, respiratory infections from smoky huts, and contaminated drinking water meant that nearly 50% of medieval children died before reaching the age of 5. A farm woman experienced the agonizing grief of burying multiple children, all while continuing to wake up at dawn to labor in the fields. Feeding a family was an ongoing crisis, especially during the lean spring months known as the hungry gap, when the previous year's harvest had run low and new crops had not yet grown. Peasant diets were severely restricted. A farm woman spent hours baking hard, dark rye or barley bread in communal ovens and brewing ale. Because water was frequently polluted and dangerous to drink, weak ale, known as small beer, was the primary hydration for the entire family, including children. Brewed by women known as alewives, this drink provided essential calories and safe hydration. In fact, brewing ale was one of the very few commercial avenues where peasant women could earn independent income by selling surplus batches to neighbors. When crisis struck, such as the devastating outbreak of the Black Death in the mid-14th century, the lives of farm women were thrown into chaos and dramatic transformation. The plague wiped out nearly half of Europe's population, creating an unprecedented shortage of labor. Suddenly, feudal lords were desperate for workers to harvest crops before they rotted in the fields. For surviving farm women, this catastrophe created unexpected economic leverage. Women stepped into roles previously restricted to men, taking up skilled trades, driving plows, managing entire farms, and demanding significantly higher wages for their labor. The economic value of female labor skyrocketed, temporarily cracking the rigid walls of medieval patriarchy. Despite the relentless hardship, medieval farm women were not merely passive victims of a dark era. They were resilient, resourceful, and deeply woven into the social fabric of their villages. They gathered at communal wellheads to share news, supported each other through dangerous births, celebrated village holy days with dancing and feasting, and fiercely protected their families from starvation and hardship. They were the unsung engineers of survival who quietly carried human civilization through one of the darkest, hardest periods in history. When we look back at the Middle Ages today, we must remember that history was not just written by kings in marble courts or knights on battlefields. It was forged in the dirt, sweat, and quiet courage of the peasant women who tilled the soil, fed humanity, and kept the world alive. What aspect of a medieval farm woman's daily struggle surprised you the most? Could you have survived a single day in her shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this authentic deep dive into forgotten history, please hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more immersive historical breakdowns. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.